welcome to those of you online who are usually here at mochurch.tv. So yeah, good to have you. Got some guests who I'll introduce in just a minute, who I'm pumped to have here today. Going to hear some great stories today. But let me start off just by framing this with a verse from Proverbs 31 in the Bible. Today is all about children, and we're doing a Compassion Sunday, and I'll get to that to understand what that's about in a minute here. But Proverbs 31, 8 through 9 says this: "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute or poor. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." Okay, so that's really, kind of keep that in the back of your mind the whole time we're having this discussion that we're having today. So please give a warm hand to my friends Greg Nettle and his daughter Tabitha Nettle. Give it up for these guys. So real quick to get us started, Tabitha, can you give us like the Twitter version of an introduction? Who are you?
Hey, I'm Tabs. I'm 19. I am a freshman in college. I just finished my first semester at the Cleveland Institute of Art.
Very nice, very nice. And then Greg?
Yep, Greg Nettle, and I serve as president of Stadia Global Church Planting after serving for 25 years as the lead pastor of River Tree Christian Church here in Northern Ohio, actually down in the Canton, Ohio area, so kind of a local. These Browns jerseys are for real, die-hard Browns fans that die hard every year.
They're just sucking up to you.
Yeah, and so Stadia plants churches throughout the United States and around the world that intentionally and strategically care for children. And so just let me start by saying it is such a joy to be here with you, Momentum. I have been a raving fan of Momentum for years. Was involved in your plant years ago. River Tree actually partnered with you, the church that I was leading at the time. And it's such a deep joy. I'm so proud to see what God is doing. And, you know, I mean, our dream has always been, right along with you, to reach Cleveland and see it become a great light for Jesus.
Yeah, that's all very authentic because Greg is someone who, we talk at Momentum about Batman-Robin relationships. Like, everyone needs a Batman, someone who can mentor, disciple them, lead them spiritually, but everybody needs at least one Robin. Jesus had 12. And so Greg has been one of my Batman type of people when you see me as a pastor, as a shepherd, but there are people usually shepherding the shepherds. And he's one of those dudes. There was an era where I kind of told Greg, could I drive down to the Canton area and buy you coffee and just pick your brain, talk once a month, and he graciously gave time to do that. And back in 2006, we still needed one major financial partner before we launched Momentum in the fall of 2006. And we were kind of like, we had two major partners and we really needed one more. And through long story short, there was a meeting where I first met Greg, and I didn't know that he was having this burden put on his heart to start churches, plant churches in Greater Cleveland. Well, we showed up here like, hey, if nobody wants to do that, we'll start a team of people that want to do that. And so we kind of crossed paths, and he kind of took me off into his office, had a conversation about Momentum, and it was pretty much like, boom, River Tree Church would like to give you guys $50,000 to help you start your church. And I was like, and so, huge.
I know a good investment when I see one, Dan. So it's true. And we traveled to Israel together a few years ago, and we both got tattoos in Jerusalem. So,
that's right.
Yep.
Pow, yeah, this is ancient Hebrew for my son Zion. This is Zion. And that was a fun story.
Mine says Imago Dei, image of God.
Yep, so that's a fun story. He's like, you want to get tattoos in a few days when we get to Jerusalem? Because we were in other parts, Sea of Galilee. It's like, yes, I do. Heck, yes, I do. And so 4 days later, I was still bugging him. Like, hey, did you find a tattoo shop? He was like, that's kind of taboo in Jerusalem. I'm having a lot of trouble. And his enthusiasm seemed to be waning. And I was like, what's happening? And then finally, we went and got our tattoos. And that was a pretty interesting shop we went to, by the way. And
there was one tattoo shop in all of Jerusalem.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so we leave afterward, and he was like, the truth is, I think I was going to chicken out if you didn't keep bugging me about this. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. I'm so glad I kept pushing. You wuss.
Just being your Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So real quick, he told us what Stadia is. He's the president of Stadia. And Stadia, just again, is an organization that helps start new churches or plants new churches that intentionally care for children. That's like one of the like number one values, basically. And then there's a partnership that the Momentum has and that Stadia has, including our partnership together, with Compassion International. And Compassion International is really a child advocacy kind of nonprofit that frees children from poverty in the name of Jesus. Okay, this is very much about in the name of Jesus.
You know, Dan, one of the things that's so important about Compassion is Compassion, unlike a lot of other organizations that do a lot of great work, but one of the reasons we've partnered with Compassion specifically is Compassion only works through the local church. That is absolutely critical. So that's a wonderful thing because it gives children an introduction to Jesus and a community of believers. But the challenge for Compassion is in some of the deepest areas of poverty around the world, there are no local churches. It's, you know, it's like, you know, Cleveland, why you planted this church. Gosh, I'd love to care for churches in this area for children, but we need to plant a church there. So Stadia goes in partnership with churches like you. We plant the church. Compassion is able to come in and launch their ministries.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tabitha, tell us about how you came to sponsor your first child, through Compassion. Your first child through Compassion.
So, when I was 13, our church back home was having a weekend a lot like this one. It was Compassion Weekend. And my mom and I went and prayed over the packets, prayed that every child would be sponsored. And I looked at every kid in the dang packets, and I saw this one that had on a Hello Kitty shirt and like a purple tutu. And I was like, yep, that's the one. And so I filled out the packet and took it home.
Yeah, you came home, and what was the little girl's name?
Kazelle.
How old?
6.
6 years old. And so Tabitha was 13. And so I was actually at home prepping for my Saturday night teaching at River Tree, right, the sermon. And she comes home, and I'm in the living room, and she said, Dad, will you help me fill out this packet? And I said, well, what packet, Tabitha? And she said, I want to sponsor this little 6-year-old named Kazelle. And I said, Tabs, we already sponsor several children together as a family. And I said, you know, it's $38 a month, and if you sponsor her, you're going to have to pay for the sponsorship, and you need to commit to writing to this little girl because our letters, they really matter to these kids, and would love for you to pray for her on a regular basis. And she said, okay, I'll do that. And, it was so amazing to me to see my daughter, kind of reflecting the things that are a priority on her mom and my heart, and, hopefully that reflect the heart of God. So it's been an amazing thing, and she's, done that now for the last 6 years now.
Yeah, so that's awesome, yes. So how in the world did a 13-year-old girl pay for $38 a month for a Compassion Kid?
I babysat my brother a lot, and I cleaned around the house. I cleaned his office, and I should have got paid a lot more for that, but I didn't.
Yeah. So, that's really, really cool. 13-year-old girl, I'm going to figure out a way to make the money to spend $38 a month to take care of this little girl. So, Greg, tell us about your journey. You've had a conclusion that kids in poverty aren't the only kids at risk. I think this is interesting.
Yeah, my personal belief, Dan, and I know it's yours as well now, but is that every child is at risk. Every child. And so there are certainly dangers and diseases that stem from poverty. So like for little 6-year-old Kazelle that Tabitha sponsors, I've had the privilege of going down and visiting her. I've been in her home, a little tiny dirt-floored shack she lives in with her mom and older sister. And she goes to bed at night, and she's really concerned about the brutality of the boys across the street. She goes to bed at night, and she doesn't have to worry about what she's going to wear to school tomorrow because she literally only has one outfit. She goes to bed at night hungry and doesn't know if she'll have enough food. This is the truth. And she can't even hardly think about Jesus at that point. She's so far down the poverty scale that she's just trying to survive. And so we recognize those spiritual risks, but as you move up the continuum and move up to enough and cross that line of enough, you move into the dangers and diseases of prosperity. And a lot of us, we don't think about this, but simply by virtue of being born in the United States of America, you are prosperous. I love doing this real quick test. It'll just take a moment. I want you to raise your hand. If you're watching online, raise your hand. And if you're watching, here, raise your hand. But how many of you slept in a bed last night? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you had a roof over your head? Yeah. How many of you got up this morning and had running water, took a shower, used the toilet, something like that? How many of you have shoes on your feet right now? Online you may not, but if you don't and you're here, put them on, please. And so listen, if you just answered yes to that very basic series of questions, you are more prosperous than 80% of the people on this planet. 80% of the 7 billion people on the planet, you are living more prosperous. Now, let me take this a step further, because this really kind of will mess with our heads. How many of you have money in your wallet or your purse or your pocket or a debit card that you can access money in a checking account or savings account? Raise your hand right now. Okay, you need to take the offering now.
Pass the buckets
Pass the
now.
bucket, baby.
Taking up an offering for the parking lot fund.
And, okay, how many of you, this is an amazing thing, how many of you have a change bucket or glass that you throw loose change, or you throw it in your car in the ashtray because there's nothing else to use that for now? But how many of you have that, loose change stuff? Hey, do you know, this is an interesting fact, in third world poverty, do you know what they have no concept of? Loose change. It's non-existent. We have these things. I have a huge jar, not a huge jar, I have a jar that is full of change. And that would never exist in most countries around the world. And so, you know, when you start answering yes to those two simple questions, you move up into, you are now more prosperous than 90% of the people on the planet. 90%. And so when we talk about this prosperity idea, it's pretty much all of us, even though we don't recognize it because we live in the United States. And so the danger's there for, like my daughter Tabitha, growing up in that relative prosperity, is that she goes to bed and she's concerned about boys, but it's dating stuff, and and you better not be, right. And no, you're 19. She's allowed to date now. We let her last year. And she goes to bed at night, and she's worried about her clothes, right? Because she doesn't have to worry about it because she only has one outfit. Tabs has to worry about it because she has a whole closet full and can't figure out which outfit she wants to wear. And excuse me. And so she starts thinking, about entitlement and what she deserves. I can do it on my own. I don't need God. And so we move out here in prosperity, and we become spiritually at risk. So every child's at risk.
Yeah, so every child's at risk. You know, a lot of times that when something like this happens, where we talk about kids that are struggling in other countries, our first excuse is to dodge that with like, well, what about kids here? And basically what you're saying is this is both. Like, by doing this, you actually are impacting kids here. It's helping us get our mind around helping others and
when Gazelle was sponsored by Tabitha, Gazelle starts moving towards the line of enough. She becomes less spiritual at risk because now she's getting education. She's part of a local church community of believers, all those things. Medical care. Tabitha moves towards the line of enough because now she's not just thinking about herself and her own needs. She's thinking about the needs of others and the spiritual needs of others. And she's praying for Gazelle. And guess what Gazelle's doing? Gazelle's praying for Tabitha. And so they're both less at risk.
Yeah, it's very cool. So my daughter, Aslan, turned 13 on Thursday. Woo, I have a teenage daughter now, and I cried. I ain't gonna lie, I cried. I was like, I can't what? No, she was like, it's okay, Dad, you know. And she consoled me. But all kids are at risk, and I'm telling you, the first boy that wants to date my daughter is at risk. I'm gonna tell you that right now. So I'm looking at you, boys. All right. So, anyways, so Tabitha, you actually sponsor more than one kid. Tell us about how that developed.
So I started with Gazelle when I was 13, and then when I turned 16, I sponsored 2 more kids. So now I sponsor 3.
Wow, that's really crazy.
19 and 3 kids. So where are the other kids from?
Well, Gazelle is in Brazil, and the 2.
Gazelle's in Bolivia.
And then the other 2 are in Ecuador.
Yep.
And so you actually told her no when she wanted to sponsor more kids, right?
Well, the second one, we were in Ecuador together.
Let's see what happened.
We were in Ecuador together, and so I said yes to that one, okay? And, but, I mean, that's a lot of money, per month for a 16-year-old. And then we were having another sponsorship weekend at River Tree, and she comes home, and Jimmy Mayato, the president of Compassion, was with us that weekend, and he was in our home, and we're good friends. And she comes home, and she said, Dad, I want to sponsor this little girl. What's her name?
Natasha.
And so she comes in with this packet, and I said, absolutely not. I said, you already sponsored 2. You can't sponsor another, Tabs. It's too much money. You're getting ready to go to college, all this stuff. And Jimmy Mayato is like, you can do it, Tabitha. And I'm like, thanks, Jim. So she sponsors 3 children now. writes to them, prays, for them, and so it's been an amazing experience.
That's very cool. So Greg wrote a book that is called Small Matters, and it is about the value of children and children being close to the heart of God. And but one, we have that available out on the table for $10. Definitely encourage you to read that.
Yeah, let's do this. For the first 50 people that sponsor a child this weekend, you can do this online even, I'm sure by, you get the book free. We'll just do it as a gift,
Sweet.
right? And that's how many books I brought, so let's get all of those kids sponsored.
That's great. And by the way, I asked him to bring books. He did not, hey, can I pitch my book to you or anything like that? I asked him if he'd bring them because I think that would be great for us to learn what he has to say about these kids. But children and students really matter at Momentum. We love our children's ministry and the kids who are a part of it called Mo Kids here at Momentum. Nicole Gates leads that, does an awesome job. We also have student ministry, middle school and high school here. And I don't know that God's really moving any place at Momentum like he is moving among our students. It's really incredible. I visited the retreat that they do in November called Freak Out. We just went for a little bit of one of the evenings, and there was a girl who got up, shared a little bit of a story of something God was doing in her life. And I just remember sitting there just being overwhelmed by, I don't know that anything is going on at Momentum that's as important as this. Like, this is incredible. And so students are a big deal. I mean, they're like 80% of our tech teams at Momentum. They show up here after school from the middle school and high school to set up this room with like the supervision of 2 to 4 adults. And it's like this team of students that do it. And we do public school assemblies for all the elementary schools here in Garfield Heights. And the same day, we'll knock out 3 assemblies in the 3 schools. And we'll do that a couple times a year. So we're a couple times a year rocking this gymnasium right here with all these kids from the school at Maple Leaf here. And so kids are a big deal to us. Greg would admit that has not always been the case for him. He's had a major shift in his life, which I've seen from a distance. Tell us about the shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little embarrassing for me now with what I do, but not all that long ago, probably only 12 years ago or so, I really didn't care about kids. They were kind of I'm being honest, they were kind of a means to an end for me as a church leader. And so, wanted to reach a lot of people for Jesus, right? Build God's kingdom. So we had excellent children's programs at River Tree. I mean, just top notch. Kids loved coming. But my motivation to have those kids programs wasn't for the benefit of the kids. It was so I could reach their families. And so they were just a means to an end to me. And I remember one fall, Wes Stafford, who was at the time president of Compassion International, wrote a book called Too Small to Ignore, which it's a fabulous book, Too Small to Ignore by Wes Stafford. And our executive pastor at River Tree had given me a copy of that book and said, you need to read this. And so I read it, and it was Thanksgiving night, and everybody had gone home, and I was up in our loft, and I finished the book, and I literally fell to my knees and started bawling. And couldn't believe that I'd missed God's heart for children all of my ministry. I mean, seminary, didn't learn it, just never got to my heart. And so we called Wes Stafford and said, hey, will Wes meet with Greg? Now, this was an interesting deal because, Compassion is an enormous global ministry, and Wes didn't know me from Adam, and I had said no to Compassion for years. We had a $10 million building debt at River Tree. Don't encourage that. But and I would say no to Compassion because I said there's no way. People will start giving their money to Compassion and sponsoring kids and won't give to River Tree. And so, that was my background with Compassion. And Wes so graciously said, yeah, I'll meet with him. I flew out to Colorado Springs to their offices, spent 2 hours with Wes, cried in his office, And at the end of that 2 hours, he became my mentor. And for the next several years, I would fly out monthly and spend a day with Wes, then began traveling around the world with him. And God, all through that time, let us become foster care parents because we didn't have anything to do. And then we adopted our son, Elijah, because, if we don't adopt, who's going to, right? I mean, those kids matter. And so that's become a real priority to us to champion adoption. And so it's been just a life-changing. And the amazing thing is today, River Tree, people just like you, sponsor more than 3,000 children now around the world. And in that time of sponsorship, God has opened up the floodgates of financial blessings upon River Tree. River Tree is completely debt-free, has given away millions of dollars a year. And I think it's because we actually started investing in things that are close to the heart of God rather than worrying about our own needs.
That's really cool. So notice also Batman for him, West Stafford, which is really cool, and 3,000 kids being sponsored by the church that Greg used to lead. 3,000 kids, most of them sponsored by Tabitha. Okay? That's amazing. That's really, really cool. So Tabs, when you went to Ecuador your sophomore year of high school, what did God move you to do? This is a cool story also.
All right. So our last night in Ecuador, there were 9 kids on this trip and their parents. And the youngest one was in 6th grade. The oldest one was a senior in high school. And so a lot of the times when you go to another country, you see the poverty, you see how they live, you come back to the States and you say, oh my gosh, there's so much food, there's so much clothes, there's so much friends, and you lose what you learned. And so our goal was to go to Ecuador, have an impact, and come back to the States. And so we went up to Dad on the last night, and we were like, hey, we want to plant a church in Ecuador.
And which I'm thrilled that these kids have that heart to plant a church in Ecuador, right? But I said, hey, it's $80,000 to plant a church in Ecuador.
Right. So we kept pushing it, and then you said, okay, well, we can let the kids start it, and then we can kind of help them out. And we all refused that. We was like, no, it's going to be for kids by kids, and that's it.
And so, I said, we have to have the money in 6 months. I don't think you know how much $80,000 is. You can't make an ask in front of River Tree, where they were all from, because River Tree was already planting a church with Stadium and Compassion with that Christmas Eve offering. And so, that takes there's no public ask at that point.
Right.
And so you guys, though, started raising money. Talk a little bit about some of the things you did.
Why are you laughing?
Because they're very creative. Let me say it that way.
Yeah.
Well, this was around the Christmas time, and so we went Christmas caroling, of course, but then people paid us to leave. And we sold our stuff, got rid of some clothes. We had dinners with people who owned businesses, and we were like, here's what we're doing. Please help us. And on Christmas, all the kids went to their families and said, hey, we don't really need anything. We don't want anything. We just really want this church to get done. So we asked for money for the church plant.
So think about that when we talk about spiritual risk and poverty and prosperity, and you have 9 children growing up in prosperity, and they come to you as parents or grandparents and say, we have enough. We don't want anything for Christmas. We just want you to give that money that you would have spent to this church plant. And, it cost us a little more than probably Christmas would have because we wanted to be generous with them because of their heart. But here's the amazing thing about this, and how we learn from children, because I really didn't think they could do it, Dan. And 6 weeks, we got home right after Thanksgiving. 6 weeks after we got home, those kids had raised $87,000 to plant that church. So right now, Sunday morning, same time zone as us, in Ecuador, there is a church meeting, just like you, in Ecuador. And there are 200 children that are part of that church, that are learning about Jesus. Because 9 children living in prosperity took a step out of their comfort zone towards enough. They became less at spiritual risk. And now more than 200 children are gathering right now in a church in Ecuador. And they're less at spiritual risk. They're being given medical care, education, a hot meal every day. But most importantly, they're learning about Jesus. And they're less at spiritual risk. That's what kids can do.
Yeah, and this is really one of the main reasons I want you guys to hear these stories is because we have middle school and high school students like that have that crazy kind of faith to be like, hey, we'll serve whatever. Hey, we'll invite kids who don't know Jesus and are disconnected and don't have any peace. And they have that kind of crazy faith, and that's the reason I want you to hear stories like this, because I see that in you guys. And so Greg also has a cool story. Tell us about the story of the church that was kind of a weird gift to you, and there's pirates involved and all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah. It was on the west coast of Ecuador, Santa Elena. There's this island that is just an absolute disaster. No running water, no electricity, and like 2,000 people live on this island and no local church at all. And so just kind of burdened to plant a church there. We had one that was ready to launch, but it wasn't financed. And when I was leaving, I was at River Tree for 25 years as the lead pastor. I started when I was 4 years old as the pastor. And then transitioned to Stadia, right? And I never dreamed that I would leave River Tree. I thought I'd be there another 20 years, but God, I believe with all my heart, called me to, plant churches that care for children. And as a result, River Tree, went through this prayer process with me because it was a big deal to leave a church you've been at for 25 years. And the elders actually prayed and fasted with me and said, hey, we affirm the call of God on your life, and we are sending you to Stadia. So River Tree, down in the Canton, Ohio area, is still our church home. And so they said, we want to bless you and your family for your 25 years of service. And so they said, what gift would you like? And they said something.
Listen carefully to this story. This is really powerful.
They said, would you like a new Harley, a new truck, a family vacation around the world was offered. And, which are all pretty cool gifts, right? And,
Yeah.
And so I said, well, let me think about it and talk to my wife. And so in the meantime, I went to Bolivia to visit a new church plant down there that we'd planted. And I'm walking up this dirt road. The church is on the mountain, and to this church, cement block church building that's the home of this new church. And there are, a couple hundred kids lining this dirt road, and they have construction paper like Burger King crowns on their heads, right? And they have these Fruit Loop necklaces around their neck, and they're cheering for us as we walk up that dirt road to this new church. And all of a sudden, this little girl comes running down the dirt road, and she grabs me by the leg and hugs my leg. And it was Kazelle, the little girl that Tabitha sponsored. And she had knew me because Tabs had been sending pictures of our family to her. So I go up this dirt road holding Kazelle's hand and go into this church, and it turns out Kazelle is extremely bright. She's excelling in the local school system, which she's now part of. But there's this little, in her records they're showing me, there's this little red heart sticker beside her name on June 6th of that actual year. And it's now August when I'm there. And so I said, hey, what's this little heart beside Kazelle's name mean? And the compassion director and pastor said, on June 6th, Kazelle gave her life to Jesus. And she became a follower of Jesus. So I got to come home and tell my daughter and shoot a video with Kazelle that Kazelle's life hasn't just been changed here on earth, but for all of eternity. And, so why would Tabs want to sponsor more kids? Right? I mean, when you see that happen, how can you not? Yeah. And so right then and there, Dan, I knew what I wanted as a gift from River Tree for my 25 years of service. So I called Julie, my wife, and I said, hon, I want a gift. Here's what I want. I said, I want a new church plant. And she said, well, Greg, nope, we want the vacation. And no, she didn't. She right away, first thing she said was, it's your gift, and I will always support whatever you want to do, which is one of the many reasons I love her. And so I came home, met with the elders, and said, I want a church plant. And they said, well, how much? And I said, $87,000. And they went, oh. And so they okayed it, though, and like a month later, Dan, they had a celebration kind of send-off thing, and they presented us with a check for $160,000. Yeah. So we planted that church on the island in Ecuador and got a new truck, a Harley, and a trip around the world for a vacation. Yeah. No, we didn't. We planted two churches. No kidding. One in Colombia and that one in the island.
Yeah. So cool. Yep.
And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't trade those church plants for all the truck and Harley gifts in the world. Yeah. Wouldn't trade it. Because when you can go see, there's a church now on that island that had absolutely nothing. And now it has running water and electric and a local church and a thriving group of believers like you.
That's cool. That's very cool. Now, all they cared about was the pirates, but it was on the way there.
Yeah, it was on the way there. We had an hour boat ride, and we had a Coast Guard thing alongside us, protection, because there were pirates of all things. I'm like, what is it? My daughter's with me? They didn't tell us about this.
Not like har, matey, not like those, but like
guns and piracy.
Like Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks.
That's it. Yes, yes.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so Tabitha, tell us what it was like to meet your Compassion Kids. What's that like?
It's the coolest thing, and I don't even know how to put it in words. So you spend all these years writing to them and seeing pictures of them, and then I was able to go see them and hug them and talk to them and respond, and it's just the most incredible thing. And there is literally no words I could say that could even describe how amazing it was.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
We have some images going up now of Tabitha with her children. The first one was actually Gazelle the first time I met her. You know, the thing that I love about, what's done, Tabitha, how has sponsoring these children actually impacted your life?
So, like I said, with the church plant, you come back to the States and you realize you have all this amazing stuff. Well, I've realized the more that I've done to show people who Jesus is, and the more I've done to care about who he cares about, it's like a whole new world. It's like you realize things, you see things, to show that you care and love for these little kids is absolutely incredible. And doing those things for Jesus makes it so much better.
Yeah.
Dan, let me tell one more kind of unscripted story. But when River Tree was doing the church plant gift for us in transition, I came home one day to my home office, and I had my laptop set up on my desk. And on the keyboard of the laptop, there was an envelope. And on the envelope, it said, "For God's Churches." And I opened the envelope, and it was a gift from Tabitha of $127. She was 16. That was all the money that she had at the time, literally, every dollar. And she was giving it for the offering for that transition gift. And I had the weirdest first thought that ran through my head as a dad. I was like, oh, Tabs, don't give everything. Save some money for your... Honestly, that actually went through my head. And the next thought was, oh, Tabs, I am so proud of you. You are investing in something that is so close to the heart of your dad. And it makes me love you so much and so proud of you. And then the next thought, and you can cover your ears for this one, was that, oh, Tabs, because you have invested in things that are close to your Father's heart, I will give you so much more. Honestly.
Car?
You can see the slow movement.
Things that are good for you, Tabs. And in all sincerity, and then here's the next thought. If I feel that way about my daughter, and I'm just an earthly father, how much more does God feel that way about me, about Tabitha, when we invest in things that are close to his heart, that reflect his heart? I believe completely that God is looking for people just like you, right now, who will invest in things that are close to the heart of God, and as a result, God reacts the way I did as an earthly father and says, oh, Shannon, oh, Tom, Beth, I'm looking for people like you. And when you invest in things that are close to my heart, I'm just going to entrust you with more. And I'm going to pour out the floodgates of heaven. And now, I'm not a big health and wealth gospel guy, you know that. But I've watched this happen in our lives. How does she sponsor these kids? Because God entrusts us as we invest in things that are close to his heart, the same as I felt as a dad.
Yeah. So, Tabitha, what would you say to someone who is like, oh, crap, I didn't know they were going to be saying you should give money to kids in Ecuador and third world countries, and their heart's kind of pumping and they're thinking, maybe I should sponsor a kid. What would you say to them?
Listen. If I was 13 and I sponsored my first kid, and then I was 16 and sponsored my third, if I'm 19 now and can still do that, then each and every one of you can do that. It's literally, it seems so small, but it's literally changing the world.
Yeah. So we do have these packets, and each one represents a kid, like a real kid. And they're out on this table out in our lobby. This is Alondra, and she has the whole pink theme going on here. Super cute.
You should sponsor her.
So she's so these.
There's some
packets,
red going on, Robin.
What's that?
There's some red going on in the face
I
right
didn't
there,
hear what
Robin.
she said.
She said you should sponsor her.
Oh, I should sponsor. I didn't hear what she said. She is kind of pretty. We actually had 2 kids that we sponsored, and the church, because Compassion only works with places where there's churches, the church closed down where one of our kids was at, and they like took our girl away.
Oh.
And we're like, oh man, that was our first girl, Estefani.
That's
And,
a sign.
So that is a sign for a cute little tutu girl. So, man, she's like putting the heat on me up here. Get off me.
Gotta start
Get off
somewhere.
Me. So, anyway.
By the way, we do not work for Compassion. That's an important
Yeah,
thing
that
to
is an
know.
important thing. Yeah, they don't get any stipend or anything like that. Pack of cigarettes, maybe. But we've got this table out there for $38 a month. And here's the deal. Like, when you sponsor one of these kids, it's like they get education, they get supplements, they get things that really help and improve their health. They learn about Jesus because this is all through local churches. They get to not focus on the basics and where am I going to get a meal from, and they get to think about things that are a little bit bigger than that even spiritually. They're able to think about Jesus and stuff. And so our second kid that we started sponsoring, his name's Juan, and he's in Ecuador, and so I've gotten to meet him twice, 2010 and 2013, and not everybody gets to do that, but I was super pumped about this. I got to have like a special day with him. This is the first time I hung out with him. That happens to be his big brother who came along with him on the trip, and I got to take him to a mall. It was like a bunch of sponsors and their kids. We went to a mall and we went to a food court. He got his first Happy Meal with me, which I don't know if that's winning or losing that I gave him his first Happy Meal. But, we're blowing bubbles. And then we went out to a park afterward. And in the Happy Meal, his toy was a plane. He got an airplane toy. And I found out he lives near the airport in Guayaquil. And there's an airport there. That's where we flew into. And so he always sees planes. He thinks planes are the coolest. And we went outside, and he's got his toy. And then he sees a real plane fly overhead. And he was just like, oh, wow, And it was just so cool hanging out with him. We played soccer in a park, and I just owned him. He couldn't hang with me at all. And no, we played a bunch. And so that was 2010. And then 2013, got to see him again. And we had a beach day and got to hang out at the beach. And so really cool. Like at this time when we saw him, he's bigger, and it was really cool. He's like, man, he's grown, and got to hang out with him, swim with him, throw him around in the ocean, and then gave him a photo album of our family. Like these are our kids, and he was enthralled by a picture of our home with snow all over it. Shannon was like, oh, I bet he'll think snow's the coolest, and he saw that picture, and the people that were Spanish-speaking around him, he like pulling him in, like, check this out. And his eyes were like, like, that's all snow. And we were like, oh, yeah. And again, this is why some of you aren't here today. No. And so it was just the coolest experience. But this is a real kid, and to see his life and to see him grow and to see him getting taller and all these things, and then to find out that our family and our kids pray for him every night and that he's thinking of us. And it's this mutual thing that goes back and forth. Really, really powerful. One of the things we're going to be doing, we hope to be doing this summer, we're talking to Compassion right now about doing something called the Compassion Experience at our Twinsburg, Macedonia campus. Shannon and I and the kids have gone the last couple summers to one they've had up in like Menor area. And so it's just a really cool thing. If you can't go to Ecuador for some reason or haven't had the opportunity, they create an experience that is the next best thing to hearing the story through the mouths of these children and seeing what their lives are like. It brought me to tears because I was like, this is so much what it's like. This is what their churches look like on the inside. It just was really powerful for me. So that's one of the things we're hoping to be doing this summer at our other campus. And so before we wrap up, I want Greg to tell us about something that Stadia is doing that he would like us to join him praying about. And I would love for you guys to be a part of this.
Yeah, so this is celebrating Stadia's 15th year of being in ministry. And our big, hairy, audacious goal this year is to recruit 15,000 prayer partners to join us who will commit to praying regularly. You don't have to be some great prayer warrior, but like your buddy said on the video, bullet prayers, you know, just, hey, and you'll receive a video, about a 4-minute video from me every month, just once a month, that'll say, hey, this month, here are the top 3 things I'd love for you to pray with me about, and here's the things we prayed about last month, and here's what's going on. And I make this commitment to you. There is no soliciting whatsoever through this email sign up, okay? This is just, we're not asking you for money. I am asking you to pray. So, for instance, when you launch your next campus, that might be one of the prayer items that's going out. Wouldn't you love to have 15,000 people praying for the launch of your next campus?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, that's kind of what I'm asking you to do. So we have this number. Text pray to this number. If you would do that right now, if you have your phone,
Yeah,
would
if
you
you pull
get
out
that
your
out right
phones.
now and just go ahead and do that? Really need for us to hit 15,000 people, because we're on the tip of the spear like you are. When you're planting churches, it's a spiritual war, and we need protection for our family, for our church planters, for your next campus pastors, and how you're thinking. So if you would do that right now, would so deeply appreciate that, because we want to get those 15,000 prayer partners.
Yep, in the last 4 weeks, we've been talking about prayer in a series called Pray. And our number one value at Momentum is multiplication. And so I really would love to have global church planting on your mind, and for us to be praying about that as a church would be a really cool step forward for us. And so would you guys thank Greg and Tabitha and their family for being here? His wife Julie, his son Elijah, they're all here too. Thank you guys so much. And I'm going to have Greg just say a prayer for us real quick.
Let's pray together. So God, it is such a joy to be celebrating this weekend with this church family and with your church families around the world that are new, church families in Cleveland, because Momentum opened and they've been faithful in blessing others and planting new churches. And so today, Father, we're just praying that every one of these kids out here will be sponsored. Children that are just waiting to hear about you right now, make an eternal difference. Father, there are so many things that can attract our attention, and we forget the difference that we can make, the difference that children can make by simply forgoing a cup of coffee at Starbucks or a lunch at Chipotle or whatever it is. And so, Father, would you take these gifts that we give to you? We give them to you because we're investing in things that are close to your heart. We love you, Dad. It's an act of worship for us. We thank you that years ago, people did the exact same thing to help launch this church. We're grateful for that. What a great kingdom investment it is. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.